Listen, there's a 6-hour window between when something is actually going wrong and when the general public realizes it. And those 6 hours, certain people are already moving. Not panicking, not filming it for Instagram, not waiting for Anderson Cooper to validate their suspicion. Just moving. Early 2022, a buddy of mine who's former special forces noticed 3 signals. Diesel prices spiking erratically, obscure trade journals screaming about container backlogs, a senator's too careful wording about strategic petroleum reserves. 3 tiny anomalies, no smoking gun. But that old chest tightness from Helmand Province was back. The feeling when streets got too quiet right before everything went sideways. He quietly doubled his food budget, topped off propane, moved cash into physical bills. 2 months later, shelves started looking sparse, and everyone was losing their minds trying to understand why. That's the frequency difference. And I'll show you exactly how that same instinct shows up in the 9 things veterans prepare before anyone else even knows the game changed. Watch a veteran enter a restaurant. Their eyes sweep exits, sightlines, who's acting normal. They choose the seat facing the door before looking at the menu. They're reading the world like an active threat grid, and most don't even realize they're doing it. This isn't about PTSD. This is about pattern recognition forged where being 6 hours late gets people killed. Here's the core distinction. Civilians prepare for events. Veterans prepare for transitions. A hurricane has a name, but a transition, that's when fundamental rules quietly rewrite themselves while everyone pretends yesterday's normal is still valid. It's just 3 small anomalies that don't fit together, and suddenly a veteran's internal alarm hums. He doesn't announce it, just shifts. More cash, vehicles filled, family texted. Later, you'll see how one quiet phone call to a diesel mechanic gave ground truth 6 hours before any news broadcast. 2 weeks after the shift, something breaks. By the time neighbors flood grocery stores, he's already positioned. Not because he's psychic, because he trusted the pattern and moved 6 hours early. 1. Exit routes and the cost of being late. Most people know house exits. Veterans have pre-run 3 routes out of every space they occupy regularly. Not just their home, workplace, kids' school, highway corridors, but they've tested these under stress. A guy who did 2 tours in Iraq spent his first month in a new city driving every exit route at different times and weather. He discovered Route 40 westbound becomes a parking lot between 4 and 7 p.m., found a service road behind the industrial park connecting to an old logging trail most people forget, drove it at 3 a.m. in rain to check flooding. The time to learn your roads is not when 100,000 others are learning them too, he told me. You know what happens when everyone evacuates on 3 highways? Heat stroke bodies and fistfights at the last open pump. I'm not dying in traffic because I didn't do homework. When crisis breaks and interstates look like graveyards of overheated Hondas, that veteran was gone 6 hours before the first car stalled. How many of you have driven your escape routes at 3 a.m. in rain? That's not paranoia. That's homework most people skip until it's too late. 2. The liquidity ladder and the psychology of phases. Veterans treat money like it's fragile shared hallucination it is. They run a liquidity ladder, digital money at top, physical cash below, tangible barter goods at bottom. Not because they're cosplaying apocalypse, but because they've studied how systems fail. It's never all at once. It phases. While families in Venezuela watch their savings evaporate into wheelbarrows of worthless cash, veterans had already moved through that phase weeks earlier, calm because they'd shifted on the first weird signal. They understood what civilians miss. Each phase of collapse has its own king currency. The timing separates everything. They see those 3 weird anomalies and quietly start converting. Extra cash this week, refill propane, grab cigarettes nobody smokes. By the time your neighbor screams at a dead ATM, the veteran already moved through that panic 2 weeks ago. That's how they stay 6 hours ahead of the crowd, learning the hard way. There's a psychological calm that comes from being 2 phases ahead. You're not reacting anymore. You're watching the crowd catch up to where you already are. 3. Human intelligence networks, the real grid. Everyone wants to talk about Baofeng radios. Veterans build human architecture. They know who stays calm when things get strange. The ER nurse, diesel mechanic, water plant manager, farmer on the edge of town. Not as assets, as humans they've taken the time to know over years. During a regional fuel shortage, everyone was glued to news trying to figure out station restocks. The veteran made his promised phone call to that diesel mechanic. Trucks aren't coming for 4 days minimum. They're diverting everything to hospitals first. Don't waste time in those lines. He filled up that night at the one station with reserves, stayed home while everyone else burned half a tank waiting for gas that never came. Veterans also set simple family protocols. If I text, picking up milk, drop everything. Get kids, come home. No questions. These conversations happened years ago over dinner. Casual enough to not feel insane, clear enough that when moments come, nobody hesitates. Information that moves 6 hours faster than any broadcast. That's the part nobody talks about until it's too late. 4. Strategic invisibility, the gray man doctrine. Veterans practice active forgettability. They engineer themselves to be the person you wouldn't remember 2 minutes later. Their bug-out bag doesn't have Molly webbing, plain contractor duffel. Their truck has 0 Punisher skulls or tactical stickers. Home doesn't scream prepper with visible cameras. Because when things collapse, being interesting gets you targeted. There's a guy in every neighborhood kitted like he's retaking Fallujah. Tactical pants, plate carrier, AR-15 decals. When lights go out and people get desperate, who gets followed home first? Him or the forgettable dude in faded Patagonia who looks like he's into fly fishing? A veteran I know, former Marine Raider, dresses like an aging dad, drives a Subaru Outback. You'd forget him before frozen foods. But in that Outback, trauma kit, get-home bag, water filtration, 3 days calories, weapon system deployable in 4 seconds. The best gunfight is the one nobody knows you were ready for. He acted on the pattern break 6 hours before his tacti-cool neighbor even noticed a power flicker. 5. Traumatic medicine, what bleeding out actually looks like. This is where civilian and veteran preparedness becomes a canyon. Civilians buy first aid kits and think they're good. Veterans train to manage traumatic hemorrhage when ambulances aren't coming. Not in an hour. Never. Let me tell you what arterial bleeding actually looks like. It's not movies, it's faster. Blood doesn't ooze, it pulses in rhythm with heartbeat, bright red and hot. 3, maybe 4 minutes before unconsciousness. The person is awake, terrified, trying to talk while their body drains out. If you don't know how to pack that wound with hemostatic gauze and apply a tourniquet high and tight, you're watching someone you love die on your kitchen floor while you're on hold with 911. Veterans stock cat tourniquets, Israeli bandages, chest seals, quick clot. They've trained their family. Spouse knows wound packing. 16-year-old recognizes shock. Muscle memory practiced years before any threat appeared. Because 6 hours after the first gunshot, it's already too late to read the instructions. 6. Water intelligence, the asset that becomes a battleground. Veterans don't stockpile bottled water. They own the hydrology map of their area like a combat asset. Every creek, retention pond, neighbor's pool, commercial buildings with 50-gallon water heaters. They physically walk to these locations and tested purification until it's muscle memory. When they feel that pattern break, they fill everything. Bathtubs, buckets, trash cans, bladders. They secure water while it's still clean, days before anyone knows there's a problem. By the time the city announces service interruptions, the veteran has 200 gallons secured. There's darker calculus they've already done. Day 4 of a water crisis, that retention pond becomes contested territory. Desperate fathers posting armed guards while soap and waste turned upon toxic. Contamination spiking as people dump bodies and detergent in the same source they're drinking from. The veteran filled containers and moved on before the crowd figured it out. He avoided the battlefield 6 hours earlier. When was the last time you mapped every water source? Because on day 4, that pond becomes a war zone you need to escape before it starts. 7. Caloric strategy and the psychology of morale. Veterans don't worship freeze-dried buckets. They store calories that sustain physically and psychologically. Rice, beans, pasta, peanut butter, canned goods. But here's what preppers miss. Morale is a survival factor. One veteran I know studied survivor diaries from Sarajevo and realized people who kept small coffee stashes stayed sane longer. During the siege, coffee and chocolate were black market gold, because when small comforts disappear, people make fatal mistakes 6 hours sooner than they should. 2,400 calories under stress means nothing if gray food turns your family irrational by week 2. Veterans store hot sauce, spices, honey alongside staples. Keeping his family's mental state stable is as critical as keeping stomachs full. They rotate everything. Prep pantry is normal food on deeper cycle. When supply chains wobble, they quietly add more each trip. By the time stores ration, they haven't been inside one in weeks. When was the last time your emergency food actually tasted good enough that your kids wouldn't turn on you by week 2? That's not comfort, that's psychological warfare prevention. 8. Thermal control, because heat and cold kill faster than bullets. Veterans think about temperature as environmental threat, not inconvenience. They've identified the smallest defensible space for efficient heating or cooling. One room, sealed. They've tested backup systems and know the exact moment rational conversation dies and bad decisions multiply. Here's what prepper content ignores. Summer heat kills faster than winter cold. Hyperthermia is more immediately lethal. I know a veteran who tested this. 48 hours without AC in July. By hour 36, his wife's patience evaporated and kids became impossible. By day 3, even smart people start making decisions that get them killed. He learned the breaking point so the shock would never shatter them. They tested it 6 hours before the grid ever wobbled so reality wouldn't crush their family when everyone else was discovering limits. Goal isn't comfort, it's keeping core body temperature survivable without broadcasting that you're thriving while the neighborhood burns. 9. Mental hardening, the weapon that doesn't rust. This matters most. Veterans have been deliberately broken in controlled environments. Cold, wet, starving, exhausted, terrified. Not once, but repeatedly, until nervous systems learned you can be in hell and still function. Guy who went through SEER school told me, they put you in a cold, dark box. You think you will die. You don't. After that, normal blackout doesn't shatter you. Veterans run scenarios. If power goes out tonight, what's my first move? They study recent collapses, Venezuela, Argentina, Sri Lanka, extracting lessons about how fast normal disappeared. They've made moral calculations in advance. How much do you share with neighbors before endangering your children? At what point does helping others cross from decency into a death sentence for your own kids at 3 a.m. when they kick your door in because you fed their family yesterday? These aren't comfortable thoughts, but making these decisions now, calm, means they won't freeze when the moment comes. The preparation isn't the plan. It's a mental state that activates when the pattern breaks. The mirror you need to look into. All 9 preparations share one element: early action. Veterans don't wait for permission. They trust pattern recognition built in places where hesitation was measured in body bags. When they feel it, that hum, those 3 signals, they move. Not in panic, smooth shift from yellow to orange on a dial they keep active all the time. Civilians toggle between total normalcy and total panic. Veterans live on a readiness spectrum that scales smoothly. Which of these 9 are you behind on? Have you driven your exit routes or hoping Google Maps works when cell towers don't? Do you have 3 days water secured right now or planning to figure it out when taps run brown? Have you had the conversation about what come home now actually means? You don't need to be a veteran to live on that readiness spectrum. You need to look at the world as it actually is instead of how you hope it stays. You need to be okay with being early, with looking foolish if nothing happens, with preparing for a transition that never comes, because the alternative is being 6 minutes late to a realization that kills you. Which side are you on? 6 hours. That's all the pattern ever gives you, because the next transition is always 6 hours closer than you think.